If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. You're listening to the Columbine Conspiracy Series. I am your host, Bruce McGuire. This is episode 6, even more Trenchcoat Mafia members. Believe it or not, we have just scraped the surface of the Trenchcoat Mafia and the Columbine Conspiracy. We will be discussing in this episode other members like Eric Ault and their association with the members we already went over, founding members of the Trenchcoat Mafia. We'll also be going over other guys who don't get much attention that also have a lot of strange and mysterious circumstances surrounding them, like one David Caravan, as well as Michael Chlebik. These guys are in the reports, and there's some funny business. There's something afoot regarding not only just their testimonies, but other people's testimonies regarding them. Now, again, this is Mindshock, where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. I am not alleging anything is true or untrue. We don't fall for logical fallacies here on Mindshock. Maybe there were other shooters. Maybe there were not other shooters. Maybe there were simply other Trenchcoat Mafia members who happened to be there, and then their presence was denied. Maybe they were given immunity in exchange for information they may have had about Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. Once police gave them immunity, what are they going to do after that? There's just so much shady business regarding the Columbine event. And that is what the Mindshock series aims to do, is to uncover and decipher a lot of this shady business. It's possible some of these other Trenchcoat Mafia members were actually good guys in this particular instance. And perhaps they were trying to somehow subvert or trying to get Eric Harris or Dylan Klebold to change their minds in some way. And when they couldn't, they left. And the truth of that perhaps cannot be known for other reasons, other variables that we don't know about. Here on Mindshock, unlike mainstream idiot box programming, we don't hallucinate to know all the variables at play. There are, of course, many unknown unknowns. Variables that we don't even know we don't know about. I mean, obviously we have the known unknowns. We have the question marks that we have no answers for. But there are also unknown unknowns, and it's very important to keep that in mind. So you don't end up like one of these Dunning-Kruger goof coincidence theorists spewing logical fallacies to justify their blind faith in authorities that they worship like a cult. Whatever the official narrative is what it is. And of course, we have all of history showing that the official narratives on the Idiot Box are not usually true. Very rarely are they true. So we will continue our examinations. As always, if you enjoy the Mindshock podcast, you can donate to our PayPal, help support the channel, help us get more mind-shocking content out there in a variety of series and topics. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, make sure you allow your device to have those notifications come through, like and share this podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. All right, let's move on to Eric Ault, yet another one of these Erics, of which apparently there's no shortage of. Eric Ault, I could not find a photograph of. This guy seemingly flies incredibly under the radar. Of course, there is the missing 1998 Columbine yearbook, which has been scrubbed from the internet, and he is not in the 97 yearbook. So here's a few pieces of information that have been known about Eric Ault. Eric Ault was kicked out of Columbine High School in January 1998 after he was accused of smoking pot and doing drugs on school grounds. Eric Ault described Eric Harris as a decent kid and did not expect him to do something like Columbine. He said he joked about blowing up the school once, but he didn't take him seriously. The last time Eric Ault saw Eric Harris was in July or August of 1998 when they ran into each other at Southwest Plaza Mall. He said they just chit-chatted about expletive. Ault and Eric Harris began hanging out together at the end of 96. He knew Dylan Klebold only as an acquaintance through Eric Harris. Eric Ault was also one of the original students at Columbine High School that wore a trench coat and further advised that he began wearing it after he received it as a gift for Christmas in 1996. Seems like a number of people have that story. Ault stated that he quit hanging out with Eric Harris before he was kicked out of school. Eric Ault stated he, Bowles, and Stair broke off from the group when they left, in parentheses, graduated from Columbine High School. So let's go to the documents. So this is 10,646. Detective Joanne Schroer, April 20th, 1999, had this write-up, and it is riddled with some curiosities. Eric Ault had called the Littleton Police Department after he heard what was going on at Columbine. A Commerce City police officer responded to his address and brought him to the scene, as we hoped he would provide intel for those at the scene. Ault provided the following information: that he was a member of the Trenchcoat Mafia when he was still a student at Columbine. In fact, he helped to start it by wearing a trench coat. This caught on and others followed. It was not a hateful group at the time. He was aware that it had become this way. I mean, that's just a constant story these guys say. That he suspected that the ones in school were probably Eric, who goes by the name Preacher. Now, that is the first time I have ever heard this. Did Eric also go by the name Preacher in addition to Rebel or Reb? Or is this a case of just confusion among high school kids? A lot of people say, oh, they had inconsistent testimonies. Well, yeah, that could be for a number of reasons. Obviously, one, deception, which could be split into several different groups. Deceptions not because they were involved in the shooting in any way or even had knowledge of the shooting. Simply they wanted to distance themselves from Eric and Dylan, which many were saying were in the Trenchcoat Mafia. Or, of course, they did know something, but not that specifically, that they were going to shoot up the school that day or bomb the school, whatever the case may be. Or that they did have some kind of insider knowledge that, again, you can split that up into two categories. They had insider knowledge, but they didn't believe it was true or that it was going to happen. So why would they reveal that? Because that would make themselves look guilty. Or, of course, they did have insider knowledge, they believed it, and they didn't care. Or you could even make a third category that they assisted in some fashion. So these are all variables that need to be considered and not fall for these black and white fallacies like all these coincidence theorists or other so-called researchers fall for. So, yeah, he said he suspected the ones in the school were probably Eric, who also goes by the name Preacher, and Redacted. Interesting. They are presently the two main people in the group. The two main people? And which Eric is he talking about here? Because Eric Ault, he said Eric, there's no last name here. And the redacted name, could that possibly be Chris Morris? Because he's calling them the two main people in the group. Chris Morris is, of course, the so-called leader at the time. That others he knew that were involved in the group were Joe Stairs, Tad Bayless, Marla, last name unknown, and Julie Dawkins. That they didn't like school. They always talked about wanting to do things to the dean of the student's car. That they were into satanic worship. So it's curious how some members of the group admit the Satanism. Others point the finger at others in the group being involved in Satanism. And yet others still claim there was no Satanism by anybody at any time, and there was no Satanism in the Trenchcoat Mafia. So we have all kinds of claims here. Also said that Eric had the anarchist cookbook. They talked about setting bombs around the school and blowing up the school. That they talked about how it would be fun as a senior prank to ride through the school on dirt bikes with guns and shoot it up. That they hated Craig Place, the dean. They hated him because whenever they got into trouble, he was the one that caught them. that last year there was a fight between the stoners and the mafia against the jocks. The mafia group would chant satanic verses as they walked by the jocks. That redacted hacks computer systems. It's curious. I mean, Eric Harris, there's actually an office referral paper here regarding Eric Harris's suspension, grade 11, for hacking into the computer system. Apparently, it was a 3-day suspension, and this was Eric Harris, Dylan Klebold, and 2 other individuals, one of whom was Zach Heckler. Now, I don't know who Ault is referring to here, but yeah, I mean, so it is known that there were people, students, acquaintances, associates, friends, Trenchcoat Mafia members who hacked the school's computer system. Ault says he hacked it to, they hacked into the computer, or this one redacted person's name hacked into the school's computer system once to change grades, although officially I believe it was to obtain locker combinations. And he also said redacted here used to work at Burger King. So I don't know. So far, I don't believe we've gone over anybody that definitively worked at Burger King. All these Trenchcoat Mafia members and associates seem to circulate around Blackjack Pizza in terms of workplace. And of course, the one Subway. But that's about it. And that they used to hang out with a Dustin Siebold, that they used to drive around with a friend's white Bronco, which we've heard about already. So, another report here, document 10,647, Ault advised the following. He used to go to Columbine High School until he was kicked out in January 98 after he was accused of smoking pot and doing drugs on school grounds. So what's curious here is that Eric Ault is admitting all of these things, where, again, as we just went over, Eric Dutro did not admit. He said he left. He said all these things when he was kicked out also for drug use, apparently. Whereas now we have Eric Ault, perhaps a more honest individual, perhaps not, who knows. He said he met Harris at school and also through Blackjack Pizza, where they both worked. That Ault and Harris began hanging out together at the end of 1996. That Ault knew Klebold only as an acquaintance through Harris, another common theme. That Ault was one of the original students at Columbine High School that wore a trench coat, and further advised he began wearing it after he received it as a gift for Christmas, 1996. That Ault identified the members of the Trenchcoat Mafia as Tad Bowles, Joe Stair, Chris Morris, Brian Sargent, Eric Dutro, and Julie Grunk, Ault's ex-girlfriend. Ault was unable to provide telephone numbers for the aforementioned people to this investigator at this time, stating that he has lost contact with most of them since he moved to Denver in November 98. Now, see, that's a little bit more of a plausible excuse, because this guy moved to Denver. So even though Denver not that far from Columbine on the outskirts of Denver, it's still more plausible than other individuals who simply lived around Littleton or just directly around Columbine. Not that Denver's incredibly far, but again, these are high school students. Convenience is kind of important. Most of them just hang out with whoever's there. A lot of them might not have extra money to spend on gas, especially if they're dropouts and they have fast food joint type jobs and they're spending all their money on bombs or cars or whatever. So yeah, he seems just on the surface, Ault's account here seems a little bit more plausible than the others, even if he is misremembering things. It doesn't seem quite as suspicious as all these others. Ault stated he quit hanging out with Harris before he was kicked out of school in 97, also curious. Ault described Harris as a decent kid and did not expect him to do something like this. Also a far cry from other individuals claiming Harris and Klebold did act alone, and had nothing to do with these other individuals. He said Harris never talked about bombs to Ault, although Harris did talk about guns and indicated that he had access to his parents' guns, and didn't talk about using the guns for anything other than hunting. Now that's curious. That could be him just, again, trying to say he had no idea this had happened, so he couldn't have reported anything. Harris had joked about blowing up the school, but Ault stated he did not take him serious. Now, that's curious, though, because he's admitting that Harris talked about blowing up the school, but he's saying that Harris did not talk about shooting guns for anything other than hunting. Again, I don't know, but on the surface, Ault here seems to be at least a little bit more trustworthy than all these other individuals. That the group, the Trenchcoat Mafia, also talked about senior pranks they would like, taking the principal's car, riding dirt bikes through the halls, but added they never did. Ault, Bowles, and Stair broke off from the group when they graduated from Columbine High School. And maybe that is true. Again, this is Mindshock. The only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. The last time Ault saw Harris was July or August 98, and also that could be legitimate because he can't remember exactly. So this is the previous year, almost a whole year. He doesn't remember the exact day, the exact week. So he's stating July or August 98. Again, possibly trustworthy. When they ran into each other at Southwest Plaza, and he advised that they just chit-chatted about expletive. BS. Okay. Due to Ault's prior involvement with the group, he told his supervisors that he needed to leave to call the police. He was at work at Entel. Ault called the Littleton police and spoke to Officer Paul Creedon, who sent an Adams County deputy to pick Ault up. Ault was taken to the command post between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m., where he was interviewed by an unidentified female detective. Ault denies knowledge or involvement in the incident and is willing to take a polygraph examination. When Ault asked whom he suspected as being involved in the incident, he identified redacted and redacted, although he had no facts to substantiate his suspicions. And it's curious, though, how much is the intuition, if he's being honest here, again, if he's being honest, how much is the intuition of former Trenchcoat Mafia or possibly current Trenchcoat Mafia members, how much is that intuition worth? Because they know these individuals better than anybody else. Of course they could be wrong. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying I find it curious that so many other individuals are named ahead of Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris. Now again, that does not mean anything really. It's just curious. It should be added to the board, not taken as gospel, simply considered and see where the evidence stacks up. Now, another individual who is not discussed is one David Caravan, whose photo does appear in the yearbooks. A Trenchcoat Mafia member that seems to rarely ever be named anywhere or discussed. Apparently, he passed away on November 11th, 2010. So, from the 4plebes.org forum, I believe this was posted under X Paranormal. There's links to 4chan here, so make of this what you will. Again, I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. There's simply a lot of curiosities here. A lot. A poster here says this. He was an early suspect in the massacre at Columbine High School. Detective Jackson, page 8671. Quote, I spoke to school personnel who gave possible associates names of David Caravan and Eric Dutro, who is not currently a student. I believe they're referring to Dutro not being the current student. Caravan might have been. Teacher Dan Fleener, page 5558, told investigators that Caravan had boasted of having firearms at his residence. When interviewed by investigators, Caravan denied this. Caravan was expelled from Columbine High School in either October or November 1998, page 8671, or January to February 99, page 6219. So they couldn't nail that down? That's weird. I mean, so either October, November, January, or February, but somehow not December. He told investigators, quote, he personally had been arrested for false reporting, which involved him pulling the fire alarm at Columbine High School on a dare from fellow student, page 6221. School disciplinarian Pete Horvath told police Caravan was a drug user and stated that Redacted was capable of doing something like this. I guess they're assuming they're referring to Caravan. Or possibly Caravan himself referring to somebody else. There is a report indicated that Caravan was seen near the site of the diversion bombs at South Wadsworth. And this is something that does not get enough attention. Of course, who set the diversionary devices? So, page 7092, she said the mother of her friend Dana Remming had reported to law enforcement officers she had seen David Caravan next to the area where a diversion bomb had blown up. Lynn Remy Reming was interviewed and confirmed this, but failed to identify Caravan in a photo lineup. Page 22,496. Caravan's alibi. He stated that after shopping at King Soopers, he saw a friend of his at the Burger King restaurant located at 6797 West Ottawa Avenue. He identified this friend as being Jonathan Schlott. While at Burger King, they saw some cop cars drive by very fast towards Columbine High School. Unfortunately, neither Jonathan Schlott, page 7,119, nor the person he was eating with, page 6254, with recalled Caravan's presence. So nobody could corroborate Caravan's alibi here. Very curious. Also curious is that David Caravan does not appear on the Harrison Klebold Associates section of the 11K witness testimony reports, whereas all these other individuals do. Quite curious. David Caravan appears only in the not on location witnesses, pages 6,217 through 6,221. So let's read his account here. At approximately 11:49, this officer, Detective Jackson, was responding. On arrival, I assisted with postings and other functions of the command post. As students and teachers were able to exit the building, I assisted with interviewing these subjects and collected written statements from these subjects. These statements were subsequently turned over to Jeffco. I spoke to several school personnel who gave possible associate names of David Caravan. So it seems multiple individuals gave David Caravan's name, who was expelled from the school around October or November of 98, and Eric Dutro, who is currently not a student at Columbine High. One of the involved students, Adam Hansey, did also advise me that a John Savage had been involved with the Trenchcoat Mafia gang in the past and would know a lot about them, but didn't seem to be closely associated with them this year and hadn't been seen by him wearing a trench coat this school year. And John Savage was, of course, the individual that was let go and allowed to live. I was also advised that the following people were reportedly in the office area at the school at the time of the incident. I did not personally contact any of these victims. I was advised that I'd be assigned to the lab team for the school and remained on standby. Okay. So, interesting. A lot redacted here. So, tons redacted in this report. These leads, which were the leads, further indicated that David Caravan was a Trenchcoat Mafia member and that he had access to firearms at his residence. In reference to control number 3749, IO conducted an interview with Ramona Madden, who is a financial secretary at Columbine. She reported that she had been threatened by David Caravan the previous school year as a result of not returning some fees to him that were paid by his parents. So he threatened a secretary because he couldn't get money back? This is weird. On May 26th, 99, at approximately 1:25, IO responded to this address in order to conduct interview with David Caravan. He is 6 foot 200 pounds, so not incredibly tall. White male, 6 foot 200 pounds. In his yearbook photo, he also has long hair. Long black hair, not brown hair. Okay. His mother was unable to be present during the interview, even though it was requested. David Caravan advised IO that he attended Columbine High from 9th to the middle of 11th grade, but he began experiencing problems and was also ditching classes, which caused him to be expelled during late January or early February. He stated that he presently is not attending any school and is in the process of looking for employment. In questioning Caravan about his association with Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, he stated that he saw both individuals at Columbine High, but really never talked to them. Which might be consistent because all of their other close friends and Trenchcoat Mafia members did not specifically name David Caravan as someone who they hung out with. And of course, we do have to keep in mind a theory that there might have been two groups involved here. So if it was Dylan, Eric, and possibly one other individual, And there might have been a second group who either, if they heard about that there was a shooting, did they rush to the school to participate in the shooting uninvited? Or were they some kind of other secondary plan? I don't know. Again, this is just, it's really difficult. It's really difficult. Early reports, of course, reported multiple shooters, some reports over 6 shooters. He stated that one of them, Eric Harris, had a German class after he did in the same room, and that he would occasionally say hi to Harris, since the two of them dressed alike. David Caravan stated that he does not believe that he ever talked to Dylan Klebold. David Caravan advised that he always wears black clothing, which would include black jeans and Marilyn Manson look-alike shirts. He further stated that he does not wear combat boots, but instead black athletic shoes. He further stated that he does not wear a black trench coat and in fact has never owned a black trench coat. David Caravan stated that he heard of the Trenchcoat Mafia at Columbine High prior to April 20th, 1999, but he knew it only as a small group of kids with no more than 8 in this group. He stated that he was aware that they were into listening to hard music, specifically hard rock German music. He further stated that they were a clique into themselves, and one reason was because the jocks were in control of the high school. Interesting phrasing there. He further stated that he had a short conversation with 1 or 2 female associates of the Trenchcoat Mafia group, but does not know the females' names. IO asked him if he recognized the name of Redacted, with him stating the name sounded familiar, but he was not sure if he knew this individual. I mean, that's a pretty good answer if you're trying to hide something, right? Because then you can't truly be caught. He further stated that he knew Robin Anderson by being familiar with her boyfriend, whom he identified as Patrick McDuffie. He stated that other than that, he had no further acquaintanceship with Robin Anderson. In asking David Caravan what his activities were on April 20th, he stated that he had ridden his bicycle to the King Soopers grocery store at Columbine Center. He stated that after shopping at King Soopers, he saw a friend of his at Burger King. He identified this friend as being Jonathan Schlott. He stated that while at Burger King, they saw some cop cars drive by very fast towards Columbine High School, and he assumed that something out of the ordinary was taking place there. He stated that he then got on his bicycle and came home, at which time he saw the events develop on TV. He stated that the rest of the afternoon he stayed home and watched the tragedy unfold on TV. He stated that on this day he was wearing a black t-shirt and black-colored shorts. In discussing the alleged threat that he made the previous school year against Ramona Madden at Columbine High, David stated that he was attempting to get his yearbook fee money back since he never received a yearbook. Upon asking him why he wanted the money so badly, he stated that he needed the money either to purchase CDs or to spend on his guitar, but he knew that if the money was sent to his parents that they would keep it instead of giving it to him. He further stated that he made a stupid threat when he told Ramona Madden and her aide to watch their backs, or something similar to that phrase. He admitted that he did get suspended from school for making that threatening statement. So it wasn't drug use, it was telling a secretary and her aide to watch their backs. Upon asking David Caravan if he knew of anyone else who might be involved in the tragedy, he stated he could not think of anyone else, even though he has talked to his friends who used to go to Columbine High School or who presently do. So he admits to being in contact with other friends. He doesn't specifically state the nature of these friends. He further stated that he does not know anyone who is involved in manufacturing explosives or bombs of any types. David Caravan stated that he personally has been arrested for false reporting, which included him pulling a fire alarm at Columbine High School on a dare from a fellow student. And just a side note, if you guys remember, many reported a fire alarm being pulled before any shooting started. Now, what that means, I don't know. Okay. He further stated that he had also been arrested for driving without a license, shoplifting, and possibly 1 or 2 curfew violations. So he's not sure if he was arrested for curfew violations or whether it was 1 or 2. Upon being asked when he last spoke with Eric Harris, he stated that it was several weeks before he was expelled, which would have been in either January or February 1999. He doesn't even know when he was expelled. This happened a few months prior. 2 months. If it was April, if it was February, we're talking April here, and this was back in February, or January or February when he was expelled. He further denied ever communicating with Eric Harris or Dylan Klebold, nor any other Trenchcoat Mafia member by using the computer or internet system. He further stated that he personally does not have a computer. IO then asked David Caravan if he had any guns or if there were any guns accessible within their residence, with him stating that there were no guns, not even a BB gun. He stated that the only weapon he does have in the house is a bladed staff, which he described as having a long pole with a blade at the end of it. Io then questioned David Caravan regarding his brother, with him identifying his brother as being Michael Caravan, age 11, born... Okay. He stated that his brother was attending Dutch Creek Elementary, but this coming fall will be attending Ken Carroll Junior High School. He further stated that his brother does not wear black clothing like he does. Okay. So that is all the information we have on David Caravan. He is not in the Harris-Klebold Associates subsection. Now, that is curious, and supposedly his alibi has not been verified by anybody. So, some more posts here regarding Caravan. Cause of death unknown. It may be the second suicide among the presumably living suspects. Joseph Stair allegedly strangled himself with an extension cord on September 13th, 2007. It was days before the long-delayed Columbine Memorial in Clement Park, which would coincide with his funeral. Stair was one of the founding members of the Trenchcoat Mafia. He claimed he was home asleep on April 20th, 1999. And again, they list here Leah Murphy's report that she recognized him. We went over all of this. And Leah, of course, picked him out of a photo lineup, and she was certain she saw his face completely for 15 seconds. And then, of course, she recanted October 99. Mrs. Mikesell also said that several students told her they had seen Joe Stair in the building. And then, of course, we went over all of the ear witness reports screaming Joe or mentioning Joe in the hallway or in other areas. A few other posts here. What if there were two teams of kids? Capture the flag type event or a King of the Hill, like the ones in Forgive My References, but Call of Duty or Battlefield. Whatever gun games were available in the time period, you get the idea. Maybe they just wanted to have one final game. I've read before that some of these kids have the simulation theory somewhat in them, ninjas versus trenchcoats. They wanted to cover all of this because it related closely to the whole death education classes. The kids were comfortable with the idea of dying. The world is a simulation, even better. Well, okay, weird. Other posters here. There's overwhelming evidence that the shooting lasted much longer than officially reported, as late as 3:45 or 4 p.m. There is also very strong evidence that more than 15 bodies were removed from the school. And of course, we'll get into that later. Apparently, there were witnesses to bodies in the hallways that could not be attributed to anybody. Some people assume these were students, but perhaps they weren't. If these were non-students, because again, the counter-argument there, if there were other students killed, how could that be covered up? It would be known. Well, if it wasn't students, if there were these guys dressed in black with black masks on, who knows their true identities, or if there was some kind of shootout that has not been public with SWAT team members or whatnot. See, it is awfully convenient. The coincidence theorists explain all this as the SWAT team so-called clearing the building and shooting into classrooms, and that's why the gunfire, not actually shooting people, necessarily, some people believe they did, but just shooting at doors, into classrooms, whatever. I believe there is on video one officer shooting into a window. I believe that classroom was empty. I don't know. There's many people discussing that. But it is awfully convenient that some people explain away the gunfire as SWAT teams simply shooting at whatever, which could be true. Again, that could be true. But it's really impossible to know unless one was there and saw exactly what happened. Could that also explain why there was no movement into the building, because they kept getting conflicting reports? All of this, I mean, who knows how much more is redacted or has been sealed forever. If there was definitive evidence that there were other individuals in the building shooting, or maybe not shooting, but simply running around. Again, we have all these witnesses seeing people other than Harris and Klebold. Now, maybe they were not shooters. Maybe they were simply friends who wanted to see what was going on, Trenchcoat Mafia members who on. They were spotted there. So it's weird how the coincidence theorists, they're so triggered, they can only think in terms of, were there additional shooters? If there were, it would be revealed. What if they weren't shooters necessarily? They were just running around the school as spotted because they wanted to see what was going on. Maybe they wanted to be shooters, but they just didn't have the opportunity. Who knows what happened? Again, unless you were in the building, and even the people in the building, most of them were hiding. They didn't have access to seeing everything that was unfolding bird's eye style. But if there were other security cameras, which is a whole nother rabbit hole, I mean, there is so much talk about possible other security cameras, either in the hallway area, I mean, even cited by the principal himself. We'll get into those references later, not necessarily in the library, but just outside the library. It's tough. It's really tough to make heads or tails of everything. Another guy that doesn't get talked about is Michael Chlebik. And so Neil Gardner, school resource officer. So this guy's got like 15 years of experience. This guy is the security officer here. And so he's a deputy with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. He was a 15-year vet of police work by spring 1999. And this would be his second year as the uniformed community resource officer assigned to Columbine High. So this guy clearly knew the troublemakers. Okay. Now, in a document that seems to have disappeared from the internet, but it's listed as 22,303, page 22,303, he said he saw former student Michael Chlebik outside of the school. Quote, Chlebik was expelled in 1997. He was part of the Trenchcoat Mafia and very volatile, always wears fatigue. So even if this report from Gardner is not accurate, but it's just curious that not only are all these students, but all these faculty members are naming specific individuals. They know exactly when they were expelled. They know that they were part of the Trenchcoat Mafia. They were problem students, whatever. They are clearly naming names, putting names to faces, people that know Eric and Dylan and these other individuals, and they are naming them. Again, that doesn't mean they were involved in the shooting, but why do all the coincidence theorists hallucinate and pretend that all these people are mistaken simply because the official narrative on the Idiot Box, or at least as it appears on the Idiot Box as of today, was that no one else was present? I mean, it's just curious. It's curious. It's very, very curious. So that's all we have for now. The next few episodes will be more in-depth, focusing on dozens and dozens of accounts, placing specific individuals, not Eric Harris or Dylan Klebold, at Columbine High School, either doing the shooting or present in some capacity. There's no shortage. So, believe it or not, again, this is just the tip of the Columbine iceberg. Originally, this was formed as a 10 episode. I had about 10 episodes in mind, but it might actually run a lot longer than that. Just the multitude of information that has already been released in the Columbine report and these tens of thousands of documents, and then, of course, plenty more unreleased. Tens of thousands or possibly even over 100,000 documents still sealed. Still sealed, possibly, what was the date? 2028 or something like that? That's when a judge sealed it. And, of course, they can kick the can down the road even further, as is often the case in a lot of these conspiracies. Obviously, if there was nothing to hide, all of this would have already been released. Hope you guys found another edition of Mindshock True Crime interesting in the Columbine series. You can support the podcast, donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, like and share, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier, so you could also support us that way. Become a patron today. All the links in the description. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.